Hello, welcome back. This time I want to talk about production. And in this sense, I am talking about making of the music, how to put the music together, because that's critical, right? So, first of all, we'll determine a good tempo for the song. By tempo, I mean the beats per minute, how fast or how slow the song is going to roll. Once we make that determination, then we can get into tracking. Over there, I have a tracking room that includes drums, guitars, some keyboards, congos, just a whole bunch of instruments in there. So when we get there, we make a good selection of the mics. We determine what mic is going to go to what mic's going to sound better with what instrument. And then we start tracking. Maybe we can start off with the kick drum, or we can start with the snare, or just the entire drum set. Sometimes I started a song one time with car keys. I was just messing around with the car keys. That gave me a rhythm to go with, and then I moved from there. So it just depends on the artist and the producer and how you guys are rocking it together and feeling the song. So you want to get in that stage to build your individual tracks. So drums, guitars, keyboards, horns, whatever it is that you're adding to the song. And then after tracking everything in, and producers work differently. I like to track my instruments old school. Okay, so I'm tracking with some level of EQ and some level of compression. Now in music school, they'll tell you never, ever, ever, ever do that, because you can be stuck with it and you don't know how to fix that. You can't fix it. So, but I've developed a pattern where I work with the instrumentation, and I can just put enough EQ and enough compression to give me exactly what I want to hear at the end. So when I start tracking, I want to hear something the way I need to hear it at the finish, once we get to the mix stage. So I envision the mix to sound a certain way. That's how I'm going to record it. Not all producers do that. I do it because it just works for me. But so the artist has to get in the mindset of figuring out what is going to work with them, and or work with your producer to determine how that can go. And then once I'm done tracking, I get into the arrangement stage. Here's where I try to align the tracks. Whatever was not on time, we put it in sync so it falls right on time. And also arranging it so it can fit with the artist's version of how they wrote the song, and adjust it as needed. So that's a critical stage too, right? To where you want to make sure, because sometimes you would, and I'm sure you guys have heard this too, you listen to a song, you go, but why did they put that in there? It's the choice. That's what they figure, right? Sometimes some instruments just don't work with certain songs. And it's going to take a while to figure that out. You got to get used to the process and knowing what is going to work. And someone once asked me, if you were to go somewhere and work or record whatever, what would you take with you? And I paused for a minute, because that's a big question. What would you take with you? For me, it's my ears. That is by far the best instrument I have. Is my ears. That's why I cannot listen to loud music. And you should maybe not do that too, because too much loud music just eats up your ears at the end of the day. And sometimes it's hard to really hear stuff the way you want to hear it. Because in this atmosphere, I got to be able to hear the slightest thing. I mean, the lowest sound, the highest sound. I need to hear everything. So you want to protect your ears for that. Just a side note. But so after adjusting the instruments to kind of match and sit well together, then we can get to the vocal recording stage. Sometimes though, I like to track vocals, like say we do a dry run of the vocals with a preliminary of the music that we already have. We just do a dry run just so we can kind of hear where we are and just make sure we're still in the right place. And after listening to that dry run with the music, we kind of develop a pattern and say, you know what, maybe we need to sing it this way here and that way there, and build up all that up and work it out so it fits into a nice cohesive element that you can listen to. Now, after that stage, sometimes the artist has to go back and practice and work on that and try to build and fix it up the way they need to. So I would give the track with just the music, and then the track with their rough vocals. So they go listen to that and work it out. Now, when they come back, say maybe a few days or a week after, then we record the actual vocals. So we get in the booth and we track the vocals. So the lead vocal, we track the background vocals, we do all the ad-libs, whatever else we need to add, overdubs, all of that. If it's a choir, we bring people in, stage them up, and track that. Record everything in real time and clean. There's nothing as good as a clean recording, okay? So after that experience, then we go down to editing, where a lot of people are going to call it comping. So you're comping tracks to get so we may have recorded about 7 lead vocal takes, right? Say for verse 1, we have about 5 lead vocal takes. So we did the lead vocal 5 different times, capturing different emotions from the artist. And now at editing, I'm going to take those 5 tracks and comp them. So pick the best out of each thing and make a whole track of that first verse from 5 tracks. That's called comping. So at that stage, I am looking for the best thing. And I gotta tell you, in school, they'll tell you record a whole bunch of tracks, right? And then select from, record 30, 40 tracks. I can't do that. A lot of producers that I know don't do that. I would take the best of the best each time you record. And that's what I'm going to stage together and build up and comp them together to build up your lead vocal track. That's the best of all your performances. I think, personally, that that's going to enhance the mix better than just having a whole bunch of tracks and then having to sit there like 3 hours trying to pick through each one. That's too much work. But so at this stage, we're editing the vocals, we edit everything else, listen to the drums, listen to the music, make sure everything fits. That stage is the pre-production stage. So where we're getting the music to just kind of sit well and make sure everything we need to take to the mix stage is in that stage. It's, you know, at this time we all have it. And so once that's done, then usually I'll tell the artist to go take a vacation. You know, have fun, because then I got to go to work. So the next stage that I'm going to talk about here is the mixing stage. When we get to mixing, we want to make all the tracks fit into one cohesive listening experience. You know, you want to bring the tracks together. It's like you're cooking. I like to say I'm cooking it, right? That's the terminology I use a lot. It's like I just got to cook it. So I'm in the kitchen, I have my salt, I have my ginger, I have pepper, I have this, and now I got to bring all these things together so this meal is going to taste really good. That's mixing. Best way to explain it. So at this stage, I'm prepping all the tracks, checking noise, taking out anything that's not supposed to be there is not going to be there. Take everything out. Luckily for me, I have interns that can go in and do all of that, and then I just sit back and mix. Luckily, not a lot of people have that luxury. And then I get down to volume control, volume balance. So you got to balance the volume so when the artist is leaving from the verse to the chorus, there's not just a big jump or a big drop. Everything has to be nice and consistent across the board. After that, I can get into some form of compression. Remember, at the tracking stage, I did add some compression and some EQ. At this point, that was just preliminary, just to get the tracks to sit right and sound right so I can record them. Now that I have the tracks, I'm measuring them up to the lead vocals, to the guitars, to the keyboards, horns, and everything else. And now everything has to sit at a certain level. So I'm adding compression to just kind of bring some nice balance to it. Same thing with EQ. At the equalization stage, I'm also just bringing balance, tonal change. You know, I'm dropping stuff that's not really, does not need to be there, like the low end. You know, the kick, I'm going to EQ that kick a little bit, so some of that low end rumble that you don't need, like even like bass guitars, some of that low rumble you don't need. Take it out, scoop all of that out. So I'm mostly working into the mid-range, either a high mid or low mid, somewhere in between. Not too much highs, not too much lows, not too much of anything. So then I build up with EQ to where now you have a nice, beautiful sound that you can listen to, and it's not going to hurt your ears. It's not too harsh, and it's just not too full of mud and rumble that you don't need. Then after that, I move on to a spatial structuring. So by spatial, I mean at this point I'm doing some panning. I got to pan stuff left, right, somewhat here, somewhat there, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock, you know, 6 o'clock, whatever I need to pan it to. I'm panning stuff that fits so I can give a nice balance. Because you look at your stereo field, it's like a half moon, right? So the half moon, and everything has to fit within that half moon nicely. So when the listener is listening back to your song, they can kind of feel everything sitting there, like you can isolate and pick something from here and pick something from right there. That's called panning. Now, part of that, the spatial arrangement too, is also I'm adding reverb. Reverb creates a sense of space. So for example, if you go, there's some recording studios, you know, huge recording studios, which already have a space, you know, created a nice space where they can record everything in there. We don't have that luxury of having that much space. So we got to use some type of reverb to build space. Too much reverb, noise, dirt. You don't want that. So just enough to give you enough to build. So we add some reverb to vocals, whatever else needs reverb, we add that. Now, I personally have a good taste for analog stuff. It has to sound some type of analog. So I have a hybrid setup to where I'm using some digital, but also some analog, and just merging those together to give a nice, you know, sound. Punchy, wide, big height, all of that. Then I'll add some delays. So delay just kind of gives me that back and forth movement, forward, backwards movement, side to side type of movements. I'm adding delays to stuff. After that, you can get to volume automation, right? So we're automating the volumes to just make sure nothing is jumping too high or just sinking too low, and just kind of get them to sit right, nice and tight. And then after that, we may also get to some form of effects, some additional effects that you want to add, like just crazy effects to just bring certain things to sound some way. For example, at the end, at the tail end of a vocal, I might add a delay, extra set of delays, multiple delays, to give me a certain feel or certain effect to that voice. Or nowadays, auto-tune is like, everybody uses auto-tune for stuff. I don't like too much auto-tune, but some artists like it. So then you have to put auto-tune measured enough to just give them the feel that they're looking for. So after this, then I'm going to a final checkup, right? Like listening to everything from start to finish. And so on average, one song, the producer or the engineer probably listened to it about maybe 500 times, give and take. I listen to it way more times than that. because you got to isolate and pick stuff and fix this and fix that. There's a lot to fix. Once that's done, then I'm checking for my left and right channels. I'm checking for phasing issues. Just make sure nothing is out of place. Check your mix in a mono. Make sure if somebody's going to play it in a mono system, they can still hear the music the way it needs to be heard. And then I'll check the stereo field to just see how wide everything is pushed out, or, you know, whatever, how that song determines that it should be. Once that's done, my mix is over. Now I just got to listen to it on different systems. So I have 3 different monitoring setups in here, maybe 4 different set of monitors, the 3 sets of monitors behind me. So I listen to it on each set of monitors to just make sure that as I transition from one to the next, the balance stays the same. I'm not losing energy as I go around with the monitors. Same thing, you know, go listen to it in the car. Listen to it on some crappy speakers. Listen to it on headphones. Just make sure to get a nice clean balance. And then I'm running that out as a stereo track. And that's going to go to the mastering engineer, who at this point happens to be a big mastering engineer over in Baltimore that does all the work for us. This person now takes that, and I can speak a little bit about the mastering stage, which is the next thing here, but that's where he would take that stereo file and just build it up into a nice, you know, master that can translate to all kinds of devices that's going to be played on. So mastering is a term most commonly used to refer to the process of taking a stereo audio mix and preparing it for distribution. Most of the time, some people would use mastering as that stage where you adjust the levels of each song. Let's say you have 7 songs on the album, so we're adjusting levels to each of those songs and giving it a nice balance. So if I'm going from song 1 to song number 2, I'm not getting any drop in the volume or any bump in the volume. Everything just stays nice and consistent across the board from the first song to the last song. That's the essence of mastering. But also mastering just kind of boosts levels, all your levels, you know, so everything's just nice and consistent. For example, I give them a file that was that big, and now I have a file that's about this big and more punch. And, you know, the kick is just jumping out of it. The bass guitar is pumping real nice. The lead vocals like right there. It depends on how you wanted it. If it's in your face lead vocal or a backward leaning lead vocal. The background vocals are just surrounding everything. You know, the strings, everything is just popping real nice. That's what mastering does to your song. It just kind of energizes the mix, you know, to bring it to a point where the listeners just feel with so much joy listening to it. So at this stage, it could take several steps, right? So it depends on the mastering engineer, but typically they would listen to the mix first. That's the big thing about mastering engineers. They would listen, a lot of listening, because now they're trying to listen to get, first of all, the room that it was mixed in. They're trying to get a sense of that room, get a sense of what the mix engineer was trying to accomplish. And then, so the mastering engineer now takes what the mix engineer did and just magnify it. Same thing like the mix engineer and the producer took what the artist brought in and magnified it. That's the same process. And so then he may begin to apply some EQ if he needs that much EQ contouring. Now, let's just cut one thing straight. The mastering stage is not going to fix mistakes that happened in the mix. You're better off going back to the mix engineer and having them fix all that stuff before it goes to the mastering stage. Now, one of the pitfalls here is, especially with some producers, like in most of our producers that don't have a lot of stuff or the right equipment, the right gear, mastering for them is just saturation. Like they just bump the volume and push it all the way up. People want to just hear loud stuff, right? So there's this loudness war going on. But in essence, mastering is not pumping volume. It's not oversaturating the song. That's not what it is, because then you're killing the vibe of the song. So mastering is just an enhancement process, not a jack up the volume process. That's not what it is. So at this stage, the mastering engineer is applying some EQ. Then he'll touch up on some compression, either a stereo or multi-band compressor, whichever he feels works for that purpose. And then also he's going to apply some type of tape saturation to the mix, to that mix, just to kind of give it some nice warmth, maybe some analog warmth to that in that case. Then also he will be adjusting the stereo image to his, just make it fit nice, especially if it was not done properly at the mix stage. At the mix stage, I like to make sure the stereo image is well defined. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. You got to define your stereo image before it goes to the mastering engineer, because although he can add some things to that, but the bottom line is, if it's messed up at the mixing stage, there's not much he can do at the mastering stage. On top of that, he's going to be applying some limiters at the end of the stage for his mastering. So EQ, compression, limiting. So it just goes in that order. And then he can limit, put a limiter so it doesn't hit it just hits a certain threshold and stays right there and can't go above that. Then he checks for loudness using his loudness meters, whatever ones he chooses. He'll check for the loudness and just make sure the song is matching up to other songs. So you put an R. Kelly song or whoever song, and then you put your song, and then there's not that drop or jump in volume. Everything has to be consistent. However, I got to tell you guys, sometimes a lot of artists, especially, and so unfortunately our artists, by that I mean artists from our continent, they like to just have it loud. And loud does not necessarily mean good. Just listen to that for a minute. Too loud doesn't make it good. It has to have the sonic character of the song, cannot be displaced by just trying to push it too loud. Okay? You have to maintain that sonic character of the song, because that's what the listener is going to derive satisfaction from. If they're listening to your song and it's just all loud, some people like that, but is that really what is going to drive the song in the listener's ear? No, it's not about being loud. It's about how beautifully mixed and everything, how everything sat in the mix. That's what matters there. So at that stage, the mastering engineer is done. He exports the file as a WAV file, a master WAV file, or they can cut an MP3 at that stage too. So you have two things: to an MP3 that can be, can send it around, and a master that you would use for either producing CDs or vinyl, whatever it is how you want to do it, or distribute online. So in essence, that is the core of music production. That's, in every way possible that you look at it, is going to involve one of these stages that I've talked about. And so it's important for the artist to know this. And one thing I didn't hit at the beginning is, when you start writing a song and thinking about producing it, think about timelines. I've had artists walk in here and go, and I ask them, so how, what is your timeline for this song? They go, I need it in 3 weeks. No, you cannot have it in 3 weeks. That's not enough time to do anything. So artists, and it's just a caution, right? Artists need to get out of the idea of rushing songs. A beautiful musical experience can never be rushed. Because, why? If you rush it, you're just not going to get what it really needs to be. You're just going to get rushed. That's it. Right? So it's always a good idea to have a nice timeline. Draw your timeline and say, I have a song here that we just released for More Wonder. And the song was, it took us a year to make that song. So it was a long time. But not really because we wanted to take a year, but because we needed to make sure the song was right. Everything was in place. And we did it so much so that at the end of the day, when we listen back to the song, everybody was happy. And that's the key of making music is if you're happy with the song and the audience is happy with what you've made, then you've made a song. And so with that, I'm going to close out here and say thank you for visiting us here at Dream Recording Studios. Thank you for paying attention to anything that I said. Hopefully it made enough sense. Hopefully you can pick some things out of here and use them in the process of making your song. And if you need any help or any advice or whatever, how you need it, reach back below and look at the contacts there, and give me a buzz, give me a ring, send me an email, Facebook, Twitter, what have you. Let's work.